Hello and welcome back to Stop and Go F1 for this, our reaction to the Austrian Grand Prix sprint race qualifying. Wow. Here we are, everyone, for what should be quite a fun weekend. I always like the Austrian Grand Prix, the Red Bull Ring, or the A1 Ring, or the Spielberg Ring, or however many names this place has had over the years. It's always quite a fun one. Short track, very high speed, overtaking definitely possible in multiple areas of the track. It should be pretty grand. So let's get into it. Before we do, though, make sure to like and subscribe, of course. And a special thank you to our members, Dakota and the Joyous James, who are members at AI Racing World Champion level and above. If you want to join them and get a lovely shout out in the video, all the information is in the link in the description. Let's get into sprint qualifying, though, with SQ1. And it did not start well for Lewis Hamilton, who had a huge slide into turn one on his first fast lap. Now, I thought that maybe he might have got a little bit of floor damage here, because you see him get the rear end up on the curb. And I thought I saw little bits falling away there. Didn't hear anything reported about that afterwards, so maybe he was okay, but I wouldn't be surprised there was a little bit of damage to his car from there out. Also on that lap, he went very wide into turn 6, meaning that he would have a track limits violation, the first track limits violation of the weekend, and his lap time would be deleted, and he'd leave it till quite late in SQ1 to go again. Really a one-lap shootout for Hamilton in SQ1, but he does get through just in the end. He was 13th place, so quite a good gap, but still would expect him to be higher, and he does set fast lap times as we go on. Those who are out, though, in SQ1, in 20th place, it was Zhou Guan Yu. No real surprises there. He's finished last quite a few times this year. The surprise, though, came in 19th place, because you'd expect it would be a Williams, but not the Williams of Alexander Albon in 19th, beaten by Logan Sargent. I think this is the second time now that Sargent has beaten Albon in a sprint. I might be wrong on that, but there was that whole thing of Albon has beaten Sargent 100% of the time. Not anymore. Bottas was in 18th, Hulkenberg 17th, a quite surprising one for Hulkenberg, who's always done very well in qualifying, especially in this stint in the Haas that he's had over the last few years. But this is his second Q1 exit now in the last 3 races. He also exited Q1 at the Canadian Grand Prix, so not as consistently brilliant in qualifying for Hulkenberg as we've come to expect. And then Ricciardo was the last knocked out in SQ1 in 16th place. The Racing Bills car, I don't think it's necessarily that they have taken a step back. I think the likes of your Alpines, or even like your Haas's with Magnussen did quite well, but Alpine definitely have made that leap, and Racing Bills have stayed about the same. So I don't think they've lost speed, they've just been jumped by everyone else. Going into SQ2, pretty uneventful session, if I'm honest. The ones who were out, though, were Logan Sargent in 15th. Nonetheless, a good result for him, and hopefully he'll be able to keep that position into sprint race, because that's one of his things where, even if he has a good qualifying result, he just goes backwards. So hopefully he'll be looking to do well there. Honestly, though, I think he could win this race, and he's not in the Williams next year. I think his fate has been sealed. Yuki Tsunoda has to settle for 14th place. Fernando Alonso in 13th. Stroll in 12th. Alonso beaten by Stroll again. I was trying to do the maths, and I think it is the 5th time this year, including sprint qualifyings, that Alonso has been beaten by Stroll. I think it's 3 times in a race, normal race qualifying, and then 2 times in sprint qualifying. So, we kind of hate on Stroll. I think I'm relatively fair to him, and when he does well, I say he does well. When he does badly, I say he does badly. But, if this is 5 times beating Alonso in qualifying this year, that's something that's got to be celebrated for him. He did a good job to beat him, and he was in 12th. The Aston, really bad right now. When you think of the money that is behind that team, the new factory that they've got there, the likes of Fernando Alonso, and where they are, really is not good, especially when you look at where they were last year. Not this time last year because they started a bit of their drop off, but the way they started last year when they were the second fastest car on the grid, and here they are just really, really struggling to beat anyone. And I think they'll have this weekend where they'll really struggle to score points. I wouldn't be surprised if they walked away with this with no points at all. They're another team that has been jumped by Alpine. Alpine have now, over the last two races, this race and the Spanish Grand Prix, Alpine have really cemented themselves as the fifth fastest team, which was their usual position over the last 5 years or so. But yeah, Aston really need to sort it out, because that has been their downfall over the last 2 years, has been their upgrade packages. We saw it last year where, as I said, they came out the gates looking really strong, then their upgrades just did not work and they lost a hell of a lot of momentum. There was the Mexican race last year where they were the slowest team on the track, and here again, they came out of the gates, they were nowhere near as fast as they were last year, but they were around the fifth fastest team, and as the year has progressed, they've gone backwards again. This is something that seems to be a bit of a pattern emerging with the Aston team, and something they desperately need to get on top of. Back to SQ2 though, Kevin Magnussen qualified in 11th place. Good lap for him. His final lap was actually very good. Purple sector 1, fastest of anybody, but really just fell apart as he carried on going. But still, 11th place in the Haas, very good. Across to SQ3 now, and in order to save tyres, everyone just left it until the last lap. The likes of Leclerc, Gasly, Ocon and Perez are probably wishing they didn't. So everyone just waits. I think it was like an 8-minute long session or something, and with 2.5 minutes to go, everyone decides to leave the pits. Now Leclerc is the big one to keep an eye on here because he has an issue in pit lane. I don't fully know what this issue was because I've just come up here right after the session has ended, but I think he said on the radio that his engine kind of just turned off and he had to restart it and then go from there. So he pulls over to the side of the pit lane and tries to get going, and in the end he does get going and he is on the track, but he does not have time to set an actual lap time. As the checkered flag goes, he's about 2 seconds away from crossing the line. So Charles Leclerc, just missing out on setting a lap time, will start the sprint from 10th. As for the rest of them, Perez, Ocon and Gasly. Perez is 7th, Ocon 8th, Gasly in 9th. But the issue for them here is they were at the back of the queue for people who were setting a lap time and basically crossed the start-finish straight to start their lap time all around each other. So they were fighting and racing each other on their actual timed lap. So when you see the likes of Sergio Perez, who is 1.322 seconds off the back of his teammates, yes, Perez is slower than Verstappen, but not 1.3 seconds slower. The explanation there is that these guys were fighting each other. So realistically, they were only competing against each other. They were never going to beat anyone going like this, but I guess with the Alpines, it doesn't matter. The Alpines are coming here to finish 9th and 10th. They know they're not going to beat the Ferraris, the Red Bulls, the McLarens, the Mercedes, so they don't really matter. Perez, though, should have known better and should have built that gap. Let's just go through it. So Leclerc was 10th, no time. Gasly was 9th, Ocon 8th, Sergio Perez in 7th place, 1.3 seconds off the pace. Then Hamilton in 6th was half a second off. So that's the gap between 6th and 7th there is about 0.7 of a second-ish. That's how much time Sergio Perez lost. Carlos Sainz was 5th, Russell in 4th. Oscar Piastri, decent lap for him to come into 3rd place. He was 0.3 of a second off of pole. Then Lando Norris in P2, Max Verstappen P1. The reason I talk about Piastri being 0.3 of a second off is just because you see how close Norris was. Norris 0.093 off of Max Verstappen there. So quite a considerable gap still between Norris and Piastri. I mean, it's only 0.2 of a second, 2 or 0.3 of a second realistically, but that gap is still there between those two. And in a race and in qualifying that we've seen recently, where it has been so close, where it's coming down to 0.0, 0.3 all of a sudden is a big gap. So again, I do think the McLaren is the fastest car here. Verstappen just did what Verstappen does. This track is one of his specialist tracks. You know, there's this and there's Mexico. and of course Zandvoort as well, but they are like his specialist tracks that he always does well at, so you expect him to pull something out of the bag. But yet again, it's a track that Norris does well at too. I don't think he's as good as Verstappen is here, but that might just be because Verstappen has had a car which can go for wins over the last few years and Norris hasn't. We'll have to wait until tomorrow to see how it goes with these two starting on the front row together, but this is setting up not only a good sprint race weekend, not only just a good sprint race, but a good weekend in general, because I think it is very close between the likes of Verstappen and Norris. I think the Mercedes lads have a better race pace than they do qualifying pace, so don't count them out. Are they going to go for the win? I'm not too sure, but I think they're definitely faster than the likes of your Ferraris and maybe even Piastri. So Russell and Hamilton was one to watch as well. And other than that, it should just be a fun one nonetheless because it's a good track. Let me know what you think of this sprint race qualifying. Who are you going to pick for the win tomorrow? That's the big one. We'll be here tomorrow morning to cover all things sprint, then tomorrow afternoon to cover all things qualifying for the main race on Sunday. So I will see you then. Until then, though, have a good one. Goodbye.